Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar titled The Goldilocks of AV, What is Just Right? In today's webinar, you'll learn more about what goes into creating AV solutions that allow for successful workplace productivity. We'll discuss topics related to maintaining a budget-friendly solution that offers performance and usability. In addition, we'll be reviewing the differences between consumer and commercial displays. John is a sales engineer at Rahi Systems and brings over 14 years of experience in the AV industry. He has designed and implemented AV solutions and standards for several of the top tech companies in Silicon Valley. He is one of roughly 300 people in the world to have earned both CTS design and CTS installation certifications.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Pristis. I'm with Rahi Systems. This is my webinar called The Goldilocks of AV Deployment. What is just right? Basically finding that right size solution for your AV projects. Why we are here, we have a couple bullet points on what you'll learn. Too much, too little. Consumer versus commercial, mainly displays. Cables versus extension, when to use what and why. And strategic upgrades on a budget. That's the big one, trying to figure out where to get the most bang for your buck. We're going to dig into the industry challenges that we'll address within this webinar right now: budget versus need, financial pushback on right side solutions, and loss of productivity in budget-friendly spaces. Starting off with budget versus need. Most accountants have never built a video conference room. It's crazy to think of it like that, right? But they haven't. So they see a line item on a spreadsheet and they need to realize if that's the right number or not. And the AVIT professionals within an organization need to kind of guide them to make sure that that number is accurate. It's been a little skewed in the past 5 years because of the open office trends that have kind of hit the scene. And instead of having a bunch of private offices and then a few select video conference rooms that maybe more budget would go towards, now you have 50 small video conference rooms that budget kind of needs to be spread around a little bit, and just making sure those numbers line up. And most of that cost-effective savings came when the soft codec became a real thing, and all the new platforms came out: Zoom, Google Meet, BlueJeans, Skype, etc. Financial pushback on right size solutions. So basically, this is the balance. It's making sure that there's a great explanation on why, if the budget needs to be adjusted. It's not we just need more money because we need it. It's we need more money because we need to have this right size solution for this space. So yeah, going back to the trends of the open office, if you had 3 video conference rooms and they were all $50,000, say, back 5 years ago, now you have 50 conference rooms and say they're $5 or $10 or $15,000, just making sure those numbers marry up, because it's such a drastic paradigm shift. And the right size solutions will keep everyone happy. Next, on to loss of productivity in budget-friendly spaces. I'll keep going back to this throughout this presentation, and it's just so important to maintain offering performance even while being budget-friendly. And yes, you can go on Amazon and get a $30 camera. And yes, the display has built-in speakers. And just because it can work doesn't mean it will work. It's crazy to say these things out loud, but it just, when you buy anything for your home, when you buy anything else in your life, you kind of get what you pay for, right? So we can try and be as cost effective as possible, but we also kind of need to keep that in mind and make sure that the value products are worth putting in the first place. If it breaks 50 times and you have to replace it, you don't necessarily go buy $5 shoes. You might buy the $50 or $100 shoes because you know they'll last 5 years. All right, here's a couple examples. This is for a small VC, basically like a 2 to 4 person room. And what technically works, that $30 webcam, yeah, it'll work. You'll see the people on the far end. They might be fuzzy. They might kind of look like people, kind of look like aliens, who knows? And using the TV speakers, yeah, it has speakers, but they're more for watching The Sopranos than for conducting a productive video conference. So the user experience in this scenario, what technically works would be terrible. Below that, I have what works the majority of the time. And so for this small VC example, a lot of people, they'll do 2 different types of rooms. One will have a table abutted to the wall. So you have 2 chairs that are extremely close to the display, with 2 chairs behind it. And then another scenario where they have a circular table with a couple chairs around it, and then that's offset from the wall. So the table abutted solution, it works great to use one of the new all-in-ones that came out from Logitech, or a few other manufacturers have them. It's got mics that are tuned for a space of that size, a couple speakers, and a ultra wide camera angle. That's super imperative to get those first 2 people that are sitting right up against the wall. If you don't have that, you'll just get the people in the back of the room, maybe half of their head. Maybe you don't even get a person. So it's important to make sure that you look at that. This is the second solution, is with that table, the circular table in the center of the room. So if you had maybe a slightly higher end camera for around $100, you can get like a Logitech C930. That was the standard for a long time. And super cost effective. Not that $30 solution, but a little bit better. And that angle of view will pick up that table quite nice. And then you have a speaker mic like a Jabra or something like that at the table that internally processes the AEC, the acoustic echo cancellation. All right. Oh, in that solution, you'll need some sort of USB transport to get either the camera or the microphone to the computer from being in different locations. All right. Medium VC example. What technically works? Yes, that $30 webcam and the TV speakers will still technically work. It might sound like you drove a jet ski 100 miles away and there's, user experience still terrible. Might sound like you're in a cave or no one can really hear you, but kind of. And the aliens look like smaller aliens or blurry aliens, whatever ends up being the case. So in this scenario, since technically you probably have similar table setups, we did like a better best. The better solution would again be that all-in-one solution, maybe with an added microphone. Most of those solutions will let you add one microphone. The ultra wide angle if you're table abutted, or maybe a point tilt zoom camera like the Logitech Rally for larger spaces. In those scenarios, those USB peripherals are pretty right size for that solution in that space. And a better scenario of that if you have the budget for it, is going with like a Crestron TSW touch panel for Zoom, or Mimo or Logitech Tap for Google Meet. I think they also do Skype as well for control. And then you also have table mic arrays. We like the Shure MXA 310s, or the ceiling arrays, the 910s, with the DSP and speakers. The DSP would then, in that scenario, provide the acoustic echo cancellation. So we're doing that externally from the computer, so the computer doesn't work as hard, and your video conference platform doesn't work as hard, and you get better results. Consumer versus commercial. Here's what you need to know. So this is for the displays. For a long time, when people were trying to uplift these spaces, and they're going from 3 large conference rooms to 50 small conference rooms and trying to fit it all within budget, the paradigm kind of shifted, and the commercial displays were still really expensive. So people started getting the consumer displays. And here's kind of what you need to know. If you buy a consumer display, the second you put it into your commercial space, the warranty's void. It's basically you break it, you bought it. You have to buy another one. So I know it's always appealing when you see the deals on Black Friday or in a circular that comes to your house, but it's not really a great solution in most cases. If you have to, and you got to throw this room up, and you need to buy a display, and you need to turn around really quick, and you got to get that one display, it's fine, it'll work, but for the longevity of the room and the company, like, it's not going to be the best solution. Then there's the commercial displays. So you see the commercial displays on the right. Those are the big heavy hitters, right? They're rated for 24/7 operation. You can leave the thing on for 5 years and it should not die, which is insane. If you did that with the consumer display, 6 months, sayonara, it's gone. These are meant for these high-end commercial displays. They're meant for bright spaces. They use them in retail. They're really good for digital signage because they get left on all the time. They're slightly brighter. You can use them in brighter spaces. And they also work for those super large format panels. Once you get to 85 or higher inches, the display manufacturers will only really do them in this high-end commercial line, because of all the processes that need to be in place to make sure that displays works the way you want it to. And then this commercial light area in the center, that's kind of a new division. It didn't really exist, or at least for most manufacturers, until about 2 years ago. And so they basically took all the good stuff from the commercial displays, all the back end stuff, all the ways to control it. With Samsung, you have the multi-display control, so you can control multiple displays over RS-232, all this good stuff. Timers for shutdown, etc., and internal switching. All that probably exists in this commercial light line. The big 2 factors are that it's 16/7 operation, so it only is rated for 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the brightness is typically 350 nits, which is great for indoor use. But if you have a large room with floor-to-ceiling windows that the sun comes in right every day that you have your big CEO board meeting, it's probably not the best place for it. But in 80-90% of the spaces, it works just great. And the price point on the commercial light lines is probably way closer to the consumer than it is to the commercial. So it ends up being a really good solution. Cables versus extension. When, what, and why? This has been a debate back and forth. Sometimes to cut costs, it's like, go with cables, go with cables. But when you're in a room and in that scenario, a lot of times the cable just doesn't work. So you have cabling. Cabling is way more inexpensive. It can't go as far. It has large connectors. That's what I was talking about. The large connector is one of the main reasons why you can't, why it doesn't work in most scenarios. Because if you have to pull it through conduit, it doesn't always work. It causes a lot of strain on that connector. And the other thing about them is that it's single use. The second that you break an HDMI cable, you need to run a new HDMI cable. It's not like these CAT extenders that we're talking about in the next column. They're slightly more expensive, but that CAT extender, you can reterm that CAT cable. Super easy to pull. You can run 6 cables in a conduit compared to maybe 1 or 2 in of the larger prefab cables. So you can cleanly install it. It's able to be troubleshot, etc. Can run a lot longer length. You're set to pretty much the limitations of the CAT cable of 100 meters in most scenarios, depending on what you're doing. Here's USB. Difference between USB 2.0 and 3.0. USB 2.0 is very inexpensive, easy to extend. The passive cable itself is limited to 5 meters, and that's the full extension end to end. So you could have a 6-foot cable and a 10-foot extension, and that's still under your 5-meter max length for a passive cable. Anything larger than that, the cable itself needs to have repeaters within it to work properly. And I think I've seen extensions for this USB 2.0 up to 35 meters or something. So super inexpensive, works really well. It's been out for probably a decade. And the USB 2.0 can be extended up to 100 meters for around $500-$600. So it's super cost effective. USB 3.0. This is the newish guy on the market. It's used for all the 4K webcams, HDMI capture, touch panel interfaces, all the heavier hitting bandwidth stuff. The bandwidth of 3.0 is roughly 10 times as much as 2.0. So there you get into issues where everything's kind of got to be perfect in that scenario. So it's a little bit harder to extend. It's more expensive. The total distance on a passive cable is around 2 meters. With these, in most of my solutions, I'll go with the copper 10-meter extension cables if I can get away with it, because for a low cost, about $100-$150, you can get that USB 3.0 reliably extended for 10 meters. They do have CAT transmitter receiver pairs that will extend the USB 3.0, but they work, you have to use Cat 6A because essentially it's a 10 gigabit NIC card that's in there that's pushing that data back and forth. So it's a little bit more expensive. It's probably double the cost of the USB 2.0 extender. There's technically only one source that actually makes it. A lot of different brands rebranded, but it's a little bit harder to get that product. So that's my take on the USB 2.0, 3.0. Then we have HDMI. So my suggested limit is 25 to 35 feet for 1080p. You can extend it longer. Up to 50 feet is probably industry standard. The HDMI standards organization doesn't actually set a limit for that as long as it passes the bandwidth. But if you see a 100-foot HDMI cable or 150-foot HDMI cable that doesn't have like a fiber core with transceivers and stuff, I would let it sit on the shelf. It's not a great solution. It'll probably fail, and you'll see artifacting if the digital signal doesn't pass properly. The HDMI cables are great for small local display rooms. For 4K, my suggestion is up to 12 feet on an HDMI cable. The 4K signal it's essentially 4 1080p signals, so it's 4 times as much information passing through. So you can't really go as far with it. And then below that, I have the different types of cap Allens. The HD-Base-T standards organization created 2 different series, let's say, of standards. And there's a lot of products, a lot of manufacturers that push their own versions of these. The HD-Base-T Lite basically works up to 40 meters at 4K or 70 meters at 1080p over Cat5e cabling. And then the true HD-Base-T pairs will push video, audio, and control up to 70 meters at 4K or 100 meters at 1080p over Cat6 cabling. If you use more robust cabling, a Cat6a or 7 or whatever you want, it'll go a little bit further. But at that point, you just have to worry about interference and make sure that the cable's not running over electrical or any of that good stuff, or bad stuff, let's say. Cool. Strategic upgrades on a budget. Why you just listened to me for the past 15 minutes. So basically, here's a quick run through of what we prioritize when we have a little bit of extra budget with one of our clients and they just want the rooms to be a little better. So the top thing is audio. If people can't hear you, it doesn't matter what you're saying. No one's going to read your lips through a video conference. So it's good to spend a little bit extra money on upgraded audio or tunable audio. Having microphones and a DSP and a professional to tune the room to make it sound as best as it can is invaluable. If the room kind of maxes out with that microphone, the next step is acoustic treatment. Getting those walls kind of padded to absorb some of that sound. Some rooms just sound great and some of them sound horrible. Conference room with 3 glass walls is going to sound horrible every day of the week at any time, no matter what an architect says. It will not be a productive conference room. So they make drapery treatments, other acoustic treatments that will dampen those hard surfaces and make it sound better. We as an AV integrator can provide paneling on a wall to also take a little bit of that away. So that's a good area to spend it on. The camera, making sure that you have that right angle of view is so important. Nobody wants to see a 180-degree view of a room with a 40-foot conference room table. The people in the back will look like ants. The people in the front will look like giants. It's not a good look. So making sure that you have the right point tilt zoom camera if needed for a space like that, or if it's a huddle room, spending those extra couple dollars to make sure that you have that ultra wide camera can be a really good bang for your buck type scenario. Another area is serviceability. And it's super important to be able to service those spaces that you build. If you have 50 conference rooms, you really need to be able to make sure that the 50 conference rooms all can be serviced. And sometimes you'll have one person or two people, or maybe you only have an AV integrator come in once a week or once a month. So it's imperative to make sure that those are serviceable. So we have solutions where you can utilize articulating mounts or pull-out brackets to be able to have that serviceability. So that's a great area to spend that money. And user convenience. So power supplies, having a laptop power supply at a conference room table is so fantastic when you're the presenter. You don't have to run back to your desk to get a power supply because your computer's about to die. It's something you don't necessarily think about, but a lot of our companies, there's actually a thing that we picked up from our clients. It was a need that they were looking for. So typically in any conference room table, we'll lace in at least one set of power supplies so that there's user convenience. And that's what I got. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.
Okay, so we're nearing the end here, and we've got a few questions in the chat box. Let's go ahead and get those answered. The first question is, do you hate having to value engineer solutions?
Glad you asked. I see value engineering as a challenge. We're lucky that there are so many great cost-effective solutions out there to tackle these problems right now. 5 years ago, the inexpensive options were almost useless. And now some are the most powerful when implemented correctly.
What is a good baseline cost for a video conference room?
Wow, that's a loaded question, but I like it. It's hard to say based on the room sizes and build types, but a typical small room costs roughly between $5,000 and $10,000. Medium, probably about 10 to 25, and a large, anywhere from 20 to 60. The higher end range of that large conference room, you're thinking about boardrooms and tricky environments or large amounts of people.
What kind of value can I add as an AV IT administrator to my company's build out?
Great question. The value of the internal team is huge to an integrator. Your best value add is making sure the integration team is aligned with your expectations for maintenance. Where the devices are placed within a room and how accessible they are. We also want to make sure that your internal IT procedures are met. Typically, computers and iPads should be pre-configured so that they're good to go and quick to deploy. It is also important to make sure that the team knows who is responsible for what in the deployment of soft codec rooms so that we can just clearly knock it out for you.
Well, unfortunately, we run out of time today for more questions, but for those of you who didn't get your questions answered today, we'll be reaching out to you directly to make sure we get those answered for you. Thank you all so much for attending today's webinar. Stay tuned for more information on next month's webinar. Visit our website at www.rahisystems.com to stay up to date on our upcoming webinars and to listen in on some of our past webinars. You can also visit our YouTube channel and view our webinars playlist. We look forward to seeing you all again next month. Have a great day, everyone.